So, welcome to part three of Before You Give Up on Learning English. In this session, I want to talk a little bit. Let me start the session by talking a bit about Western culture. When you grow up in the West as a kid, you have some very interesting things that your parents share with you. Of course, all of you have probably heard of Christmas and Santa Claus. So we know that Santa Claus is supposed to be a mythical character. He rides on a sleigh through the air from the North Pole, and he brings all the good children gifts for Christmas. And he comes down your chimney and eats your cookies and milk. So that's the myth of Christmas and the myth of Santa Claus. By the time most of us are 8, we stop believing in Santa Claus. At Easter time, which is supposed to be a Christian holiday, they've created a myth called the Easter Bunny. And the Easter Bunny leaves eggs all around different places, and we go on an egg hunt. So kids in the West will typically go for an Easter egg hunt. In the ancient tradition, they used to paint hard-boiled eggs with different dyes and colors and make them look attractive as kind of a craft. But modern Easter eggs nowadays are made out of chocolate. We just buy them in the supermarket or the grocery store or the candy store. So that's kind of the modern tradition, but it's the myth that we have of the Easter Bunny. And also, if you're a kid growing up in the West, you have the Tooth Fairy. And so the Tooth Fairy is a lot of fun. So if you lose a tooth when you're growing up, which you always do, you put the tooth under your pillow. And when you wake up in the morning, there's money. So if your parents are rich, you get a $1 or $5 bill. If you're not so well off, you might get 25 cents. You might get 50 cents under your pillow. And that's the magic of the Tooth Fairy. But all these things, when you're growing up, are kind of things that you believe in. At some point in time, you stop believing. You stop believing in Santa Claus. Who's going to come down the chimney, on a snowy evening. And you stop believing in the Easter Bunny, and you stop believing in the Tooth Fairy. You realize that probably it's your parents that set everything up. But the worst thing of that, once you get to that stage in your life, you also begin to have self-doubt, which is you don't believe in yourself. And that's really kind of the saddest time. You also start to lose your imagination and your creativity and your curiosity. A lot of things happen at that period in your childhood, and it happens to many of us. Some to a greater degree, some to a lesser degree. So let's shift gears and go into the theme I want to talk to you about today. And the theme I want to talk to you about today is Back to the Future. There was a very famous movie back in the 1980s. It's a series of 3 movies called Back to the Future. And this young boy meets up with a professor who's kind of a mad professor and who invents a time machine. And so in the series of 3 movies, they're able to go back and forth to different times. And I think this is, again, something like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. It's something a lot of us fantasize about. Imagine if there was a time machine, what we could do with a time machine. And it's really something we can think about. A time machine is really an interesting and fascinating idea that many of us have thought about and read about, in fiction and science fiction. But it's something we don't think about for ourselves. Why do I say that? Is it possible to create your future? And it certainly is. But you cannot have a future if you cannot imagine one. Your possibilities for tomorrow are there if you're willing to start creating them today. For many of us, our time machine is a past time machine. We tend to live in the past. We don't want to take another English course because we did poorly in the last one. We don't want to study more vocabulary because we didn't do so well the last time. The past becomes our enemy. So instead of creating a compelling future, we live in the past. And that's our time machine. It's possible to create a future of your own, but it takes some risk. It takes some courage. I always reflect back at my own grandfather who left my village of Hoiping with no money, just the possibility that a cousin who lived in a faraway place in Canada called Halifax might pick him up if he got off the train. You got to remember those days there was no telephone, there was no internet, there was no email. You probably I don't even know if he had a map or not of where he was going. He had to get on a boat from Hoi Ping to go to Hong Kong for 2 days, then change boats for another boat for 20 days. And this was in steerage. This is not like first class like a tourist where you have meals. You kind of had to, sleep probably on the hardwood floor the best you could. And then after 20 days, he arrived in Vancouver, where he had to take a train from Vancouver to Halifax for another 5 days. So do the math. This is like 29 days of your life on the possibility that someone might meet you at the train station and you would have a future. But he did it many, many times. And remember, he didn't know English. He was going to an English-speaking country without knowing English. But he believed he had a future. And that's why he did it. With that belief, the belief that you could have a future is so strong, it can compel you to do anything you want. So the lesson today is, what does your future in learning English and becoming fluent as an English speaker look like? It's also been researched that when we project into the future, if we project 1 year ahead, we will overestimate what we can do. If we project ourselves 3 years into the future, we will underestimate what we can do. So the lesson we learn from that is, when we have a longer range goal, we tend to underestimate what we can do. So have a lofty goal. And a goal needs to be very specific. You don't just say, I want to improve my vocabulary. I wish I knew more words. You need to make it very specific. So you need to tell yourself something like, in 4 months, I will learn 300 words. If you want to learn to speak better, again, you need to set a very specific goal into the future. So for example, if you work for a company and you've been asked to give presentations at a meeting, and always you say to the boss, that, sorry, I don't think I can do it. Make it a goal in 3 months or 6 months. You tell yourself, in 3 months, I will be able to speak to a group of 10 people for 4 minutes. Or in 6 months, I will be able to speak to a group of 20 people when I'm asked for 4 minutes. And you make it a goal, something in the future. If you do that, your possibilities will be great because you've expanded your future possibilities. You've created your own time machine. And time machines like this do work. It's been proven. The one more thing you need to know when you're doing this, get rid of the idea of perfectionism. Perfectionism is the enemy of productivity. You heard me. Perfectionism creates procrastination. Because you want to do everything perfectly, you won't do it. You need to develop a sense of doing things with excellence. Excellence, not perfectionism. People who seek perfectionism do very few things in life. They don't write the book they want to write. They won't take the course they need to take because they think they can't do it perfectly. So the two things in life that I want to share with you is not just about learning English, it's about life. Is create a compelling future for yourself. If you can't create a compelling future, you can't have one. If you live in the past, you can't have a future. And set specific time-based goals for yourself to improve your English skills. Your skills, what you need to learn, what you want to learn, and then go for it. You can do it.